My name is Carol Rosin. I'm an educator who became the first woman corporate manager of an aerospace company, Fairchild Industries. I'm a space and missile defense consultant. I've consulted to a number of companies, organizations, government departments, even the intelligence community. I was a consultant to TRW working on the MX missile. So I was part of that strategy, which turned out to be a role model for how to sell space-based weapons to the public, the MX missile being yet another weapon system that we didn't need. And I founded the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space, a Washington, D.C. based think tank. I'm an author and have testified before the Congress, the President's Commission on Space, and to a number of committees of that kind of relevance. Of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. Von Braun had a history of working with weapon systems and had escaped from Peenemünde to come to this country and landed as vice president of Fairchild Industries when I had met him. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea, and about the alternatives that are available. And as practically a deathbed speech, he educated me about those concepts and who the players were in this game, and gave me the responsibility, since he was dying, of continuing this effort to prevent the weaponization of outer space. He invited me to come up on the platform with him, and actually he's holding on to me in this picture. I'm trying to get off of the platform, and he's holding on to this, trying to make me laugh. He's telling me jokes. When Wernher von Braun was dying of cancer, he asked me to be his spokesperson, to appear on occasions when he was too ill to speak. And I did. And what he asked me to do was to educate decision makers and the public about why we shouldn't be putting weapons in space, why they're a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea, and what the alternatives are, how we could be building a cooperative space system. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again during the approximately 4 years that I had the opportunity of working with him, and that was the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers, and the scare tactics, the spin that was being put on a weapon system. And that was how we identify an enemy. The enemy, at first he said, the enemy against whom we're going to build a space-based weapon system that he thought was a ridiculous idea, unnecessary and very dangerous, not to mention too costly, etc. The strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card, and remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie. A lie. I think I was too naive to know at that time the seriousness of the nature of the spin that was being put on the system. And now the pieces are starting to fall into place. We're building a space-based weapon system based on a premise that is a lie, a spin. And Wernher von Braun was trying to hint that to me back in the early 70s and right up until the moment when he died in 1977. What he told me is that there's an accelerated effort in place. He didn't mention a timeline, but he said that it was going to be speeding up faster than anybody could possibly imagine. That the effort to put weapons in space was not only based on a lie, but would accelerate past the point of people even understanding it until it was already up there and too late. When von Braun was dying in front of me, the very first day that I met him, he had tubes draining out of his side. And he was tapping on the desk telling me, "You will come to Fairchild." I was a school teacher. "You will come to Fairchild and you will be responsible for keeping weapons out of space." And the way he said it with the intenseness in his eyes, and added that very first day, the first time I met him, that space-based weapons were a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea. And that the last card that was being held was the extraterrestrial enemy card. The intensity with which he said that made me realize that he knew something that he was too afraid to mention. He was too afraid to talk about it. He would not tell me the details. I'm not sure that I would have absorbed them if he had told me the details or even believed him in 1974. But there was no question that that man knew, and had a need to know, I found out later. There's no doubt in my mind that Wernher von Braun knew about the extraterrestrial issue. The very first meeting that I had with him in 1974, when he said to me, "You will be responsible for keeping weapons out of space. I'm dying of cancer and you have to take over for me." And when he explained to me the reasons for why weapons were going to be put into space, the enemies against whom we were going to build these weapons, and that all of that was a lie. And when he mentioned the extraterrestrial card, that extraterrestrials, aliens he called them, were going to be identified as the final enemy against whom we were going to build space-based weapons back in '74, the way he said it to me, there was no doubt in my mind that he knew something that he was too afraid to talk about. Wernher von Braun never spoke to me about any of the details that he knew, or might have known, or thought about, related to extraterrestrials, except that extraterrestrials were one day going to be identified as an enemy against whom we are going to have to build an enormous space-based weapon system. Even though he didn't give me the details, however, the look in his eyes made it clear to me that he knew that there was something going on that was a big secret that he could not divulge. Wernher von Braun actually told me that the spin was a lie, that the premise for space-based weaponry, the reasons that were going to be given, the enemies that we were going to identify, were all based on a lie. In 1977, I was at a meeting in Fairchild Industries in a conference room called the War Room. And in that room were a lot of charts on the walls with enemies, identified enemies, names that people had never heard of, names like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. But we were talking then about terrorists, the potential terrorists. No one had ever talked about this before, but this was the next stage after the Russians against whom we were going to build space-based weapons, these terrorists. And I stood up in this meeting and I said, "Excuse me, why are we talking about these potential enemies against whom we're going to build space-based weapons if in fact we know that they are not the enemy at this time?" And they continued the conversation about how they were going to antagonize these enemies and that at some point there was going to be a war in the Gulf, a Gulf War. Now this is 1977. This is 1977. And they were talking about creating a war in the Gulf region when there was $25 billion in the space-based weapons program that yet had not been identified. It wasn't called the Strategic Defense Initiative, at least, until 1983. This weapons system then had obviously been going on for some time that I didn't know anything about. So I stood up in this meeting in 1977 and it said, I'd like to know why we're talking about space-based weapons against these enemies. I'd like to know more about this. Would somebody tell me what this is about? Nobody answered. They went on with this meeting as though I hadn't said anything. And suddenly I heard myself stand up in the room and say, if nobody can tell me why you were planning a war in the Gulf when there's a certain amount of money in a budget so that you can create the next set of weapons systems that will be the beginning of the sell to the public about why we need space-based weapons, consider this my resignation, and you will hear from me again. And nobody said a word, because they were planning a war in the Gulf, and it happened exactly as they planned it, on time. If anyone had any doubt at all about how far advanced the research and development program, the largest R&D program in recorded history, is today, these books are proof. This is the National Missile Defense Deployment Environmental Impact Statement, but it comes in 4 huge volumes, and they're being sent all over the country, maybe even to different parts of the world, to our allies. There were lists on the wall of identified enemies against whom we were going to build space-based weapons. They were also talking about the plans to create the Gulf War, and that's when the Gulf War was first being planned, back in 1977.
Who was at this meeting?
The room was filled with people in the revolving door game. There were people that I had seen once in a military uniform and other times in a gray suit and an industry outfit. These people play a revolving door game. They work as consultants, industry people, and or military and intelligence people. They work in the industries, and they revolve themselves through these doors and right into government positions. I stood up in this meeting and asked if I was hearing correctly, that when there was $25 billion expended in the space-based weapons budget, the research and development budget, that there was going to be a war in the Gulf, stimulated, created, so that they could then sell the next phase of weapons to the public and the decision makers. That this war was going to be created so that they could dump the old weapons and create a whole new set of weapons. I had to resign from that position. I could no longer work in that industry. And in that room were the revolving door people. They were people whom I had seen in military uniforms, in their gray pinstripe business suits, the same people. I see them then getting jobs in the government. They're affiliated with the intelligence community and or universities. This is the military-industrial complex, and they are in revolving door jobs. In about 1990, I was sitting in my living room looking at now the money that had been spent on space-based weapons research and development programs. And I realized that it had come to that number, about $25 billion. And I said to my husband, I am now going to stop everything. I'm going to stop and sit and watch CNN television, and I'm going to wait for the war to happen. And my husband said, well, you've finally gone over the lid, you have flipped out. Friends said, you have really gone too far this time. There is not going to be a war in the Gulf. Nobody's talking about a war in the Gulf. And I said, there's going to be a war in the Gulf. I'm going to sit here and wait for the war in the Gulf. And it happened, right on schedule. As part of the war game in the Gulf, of course, we were told, we the public, that the United States was successfully shooting down Russian Scud missiles. And we were rationalizing new budgets based on that success. In fact, we found out later, after the budgets were approved for the next phase of weapons, that it was a lie. We did not have the technology. We did not have successful shoot downs the way we were told. It was all a lie. just to get money, more money, put in the budgets to make more weapons. I was one of the first people to go independently to Russia when I heard that they had killer satellites. And when I went to Russia in the early 70s, I found out they didn't have killer satellites. It was a lie. And in fact, the Russian leaders and people wanted peace. They wanted to cooperate with the United States and the people of the world. Another time I called Saddam Hussein when he was lighting his oil fields on fire. And my husband was in the kitchen while I was making this phone call, and I got a call back from his first attaché with Saddam Hussein nearby, I was told, saying, "Are you a reporter? Are you an agent? Why do you want to know?" And I said, "No, I'm just a citizen who helped to start the movement to prevent the weaponization of outer space, and I have found that a lot of the stories that I've been told about weapon systems and the enemies are not true. So I wanted to find out what Saddam Hussein wants, what would satisfy him to have him stop making these oil fields go on fire and stop antagonizing people." And he said, "Well, nobody's ever asked him that question, what he wants." So when I hear that there's a possible threat of extraterrestrials, and I look at the history of thousands of years of possible visitations, recorded history, and when I hear now the stories of the disclosures of honest military intelligence industry people who have had experiences with UFOs, with crashes and landings, with live or dead bodies of extraterrestrial beings, people from out in the universes. And if I'm ever told that these are enemies against whom we have to build space-based weapon systems, based on my own personal experience of having worked in the military-industrial complex on weapon systems and military strategy, I'm going to know it's a lie. It's a lie. And I'm not only not going to believe it, but I'm going to go out as loudly as I can and tell everyone to take a look. I've been tracking the space-based weapons issue for about 26 years. I have debated generals, congressional representatives. I've testified before the Congress and the Senate. I've met with people in over 100 countries. And I have not been able to identify who the people are who are making this space-based weapon system happen. I see the news. I see the administrative decisions being made. I know that they're all based on lies and greed. And I have yet to be able to identify who the people are. And that's after tracking this issue for 26 years. I know that there are big secrets being kept. And I know it's time that the public and decision makers pay attention to the people who are now going to be disclosing the truth. And then...
Welcome to the Prophecy Club, where we provide information and resources with a prophetic warning message to win souls to Jesus and to call people to repentance. Now, I realize that our topic that we're discussing this evening is a very risky topic. As a matter of fact, I think that most ministries that want to stay in the ministry don't discuss it. And so I hope you appreciate our courage in bringing this to you. He's going to be talking on the topic of exposing the strong delusion. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 10 to 12 says, "Because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved, and for this cause God will send them a strong delusion, so that they should believe a lie, they that all might be damned who believe not the truth." Jesus is Lord, not all, when they receive Jesus as Lord, when they see this strong delusion, whatever it might be coming up, it is going to be so deceptive, so convincing, that it would deceive, Jesus said, if it were possible, even the very elect. So it is not something that the average person has even seen, I believe. It's going to be something so fantastic that it's going to blow the minds, the beliefs, shake the very foundations of most people, even to almost the Christians. But if it were possible. But it's not possible, because those that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. I want to read to you a quote. This comes from Henry Kissinger, Dr. Henry Kissinger. He said this at the Bilderberg Conference, Evian, France, 1991. Today, America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. He was referring to the 1991 LA riots. Today, or tomorrow, they would be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there were an outside threat from beyond, i.e. an extraterrestrial invasion, is what he's talking about, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of the world being granted to them by the world government. Do you think Henry Kissinger knew what he was talking about, or was he just talking out of turn? Was he just speaking foolishly from something he knows nothing about? I don't think so. I think he knows something that we don't know. I think he knows about the strong delusion. What is a delusion? I looked at the word delusion. A delusion is a false belief based on incorrect inference about external reality that is firmly sustained despite what almost everybody else believes and despite what constitutes an incontrovertible, almost got to think to say that one, incontrovertible, and obvious proof or evidence to the contrary. The belief is not one ordinarily accepted by other members of the person's culture or subculture. In other words, it's something that shakes our foundations. It was prophesied that your speaker tonight would warn the world of a great deception. At God's direction, he has researched this delusion for over 2 years, has read 6 books, and had a conversation with one insider. And I think now, based upon just wrapping up his tour, he's probably had some more conversations with some more insiders he might just tell you about. Dr. Murray says that God will allow the same sons of God of Genesis 6 to once again cause a strong delusion. Dr. Murray is going to tell you that it all began when an angel protecting America shot down the spacecraft crashing at Roswell. He's going to reveal the top secret treaty between Dwight Eisenhower, signed exchanging high technology for rights. They will deceive and briefly rule the world, he says. They will point to the Antichrist as the answer to Earth's problems. All who have not already received Jesus Christ will probably believe the lie and be damned. Just recently we had Prophet Tom Deckard on a speaking tour, made a videotape called Visions of America's Judgment. He has prophesied many things he has never missed. One of the things he was shown in one of the visions was that UFOs will make open contact with the people of the earth. That, brothers and sisters, could be the strong delusion, and that's why we have the topic tonight. Some of his topics he will cover will be: Roswell exposed the deception. The Treaty of Muroc Air Base set their plan in motion. Secret societies at the Tower of Babel cooperated with it. Genetic engineering. The history of a race of giants play a part. Deception from the days of Noah will return. Craft and occult will prosper. Reverse engineered products used today, such as Teflon, lasers, fiber optics, super strength fibers, silicone chips, computers, and where they may have came from. Help me welcome your speaker for tonight, Dr. Murray. God bless you, Doctor. Glad to hear you. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. I've been all across America, and I didn't know how America would receive this message. But this message was well received, and it was shocking. There is absolutely no Christian ministries operating to help people. I've listened to doctors, I've listened to lawyers, I've listened to engineers, I've listened to some people that weren't quite all there. But all these together, there is absolutely no one listening. They're going to be blinded and blindsided by this circumstances that's going to happen. Before I begin, and also I'd like to say there was 2 other witnesses before me that talked. And one of them was Decker, and one of them is Steve over here. They helped me. Steve, thank you for the help you've given me on this. But I'm the last of 3 on this subject. And out of 3 witnesses, you should get a general feeling of what's going on. Now, I've talked to audiences all the way from the size of 100, actually down to maybe 60, 70. All across, they seem to be interested in this. But you are the salt of the earth. You're the first line of defense. You're to wake the rest of the church up, because they don't know. They're hiding their head in the sand. Now, before I begin, I have a prayer that the Lord gave me. And I want to open with this. If you will agree with me and pray with me in this, I will state this prayer, and please bow your heads. In the name of Jesus Christ, Yeshua, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, and through His blood shed on Calvary, I bind and blind the enemy, Satan and his cohorts and allies, from understanding what I'm saying. And I loose whatever needs to be loosed to accomplish this. I place an impregnable shield of protective angels around myself, my family, my possessions, my legalities, and all aspects of my life and family, and around everyone here, and those listening to this message that are in the body of Christ. And further, I send back on the enemies of God all attacks intended for me, or these listeners, or these ministry tenfold. I bind any human chalices or individuals sent here or listening to this tape who has been assigned to disturb this message. And I pray that this information will allow the scales to drop from eyes that haven't seen and open ears that haven't heard, so that the body of Christ will use this information to prepare and make ready the imminent return of our Messiah, Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. Amen. Now, in April of 93, we were having some trouble in a little church we were in. And it's ironic, some of the people were here. That's such a blessing, such a confirmation. And I was getting ready for work. I work on Saturdays, and the Lord had me sit down and begin writing. And I thought it was for that church, and it partially was. But it was also for this time. I had no idea that it was for this time. And so I'm going to read this, and just the way God gave it, because it's a prelude to what I'm going to say tonight. It's titled, "The Storm is Coming. Wake, Church. Don't watch the world, watch me, says God. Just like in the times of Noah, people scoffed and laughed at Noah and his family, but he separated himself and his family for God's purpose. You are called to be my people. Don't watch the world, watch me, your Lord God. You are a peculiar people and are to be sanctified or separated from the world. I'm looking for my people to be obedient to my will and to submit yourselves to the Lord God Almighty, a people who won't let self, world, or anything get in the way of a move of God. Turn off your TVs, your radios, seek me first, and I will give you the news. Get into my word, for there you will find refuge from the storm that is coming. Read the signs of the time, not the front page. Soon there will be persecutions against you. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to wear that crown? Wake up, church. As the world sees it, there's only a slight change in definition in a cult according to the developing politically correct idea and philosophy and your beliefs as a peculiar people. The fullness of time is all that separates you who are my people and Waco, Texas, even though they are misguided in their ideas. Read the warnings of the time. You need to be strong. You need to seek my Holy Spirit. You need to be armed with spiritual weapons. Your battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the evil spirits and principalities in the high places. They puppet the world. Seek the gifts. Prophets prophesy. Healers heal. Exhorters exhort. Musicians, play the music I've given you to play. And by that I mean God's given each church their own music. They have their own battles. And they have to have that. That's just like Jericho had to have a particular way of handling that circumstances, bring those walls down. Each church has people that are writing music and others that's putting it into the musical form. That needs to be done. You're fighting your own individual battles, and you need music to do that. Teachers, teach the word as it is written. Discerners, start discerning the events, trends, and people around you. Operate in all the gifts as a church and body. If not, then I will separate you. And He did separate our church. When what is hurting among you, seek them out and love them and surround them with prayer and concern. Reach out. You are all in one body. As in one body, when the finger hurts, all the body suffers. The least of your brothers and sisters are just as important as the others. You need each other. Time is short. Wake up, church. Don't walk too fast nor too slow. Walk in time with God. Get into my word in Acts and see how the early church operated. That's how you, the in-church, need to operate. There is nothing in my word that says the gifts have ended with the apostles. Time is short. Wake up, church. If some of you don't get with it, you may be left behind. Get extra oil for your lamps. Seek the Holy Spirit. Wake up, church. The storm is coming. In the Lord God Almighty, you will find refuge from the storm. In the Lord, you will experience the joy and peace that surpasses all understanding. The Lord will give you more than enough grace and gifts if you will submit yourself. Wake up, church. Now, the 2 Thessalonians that I usually talk about that, but I'm going to jump over here to the Ephesians 6, 9 through 12. And in it, you can see, let's go through that. It says basically, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, high places here in this term, and I need to get a foundation in the Scriptures before we actually go into the events that I'm going to be talking about. High places in the Scripture talks about the solar system. It comes from a Greek word called eperanosis, which means heavenlies or solar systems. The pagans believed that their god was in the sun, and they worshiped Lucifer as their god. And that's why in the old pagan religions you'll see a nimbus, which is like a halo around Lucifer in the early pictures in ancient times. And you also see that, unfortunately, as the church became more paganized in Catholic Church, they stuck it on saints, and then they stuck this nimbus on Christ even. But it's a sign of the pagan approach that has come into the church. Now, in Hebrews 9:23, it refers to purifying the heavenlies by Christ's return. When He comes back, there's a description that the heavenlies are very, I guess the word is toxic, it's dark. Because in Isaiah 30:26, the light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be sevenfold as the light of 7 days. So things are going to change in the heavenly. He's coming back and He's purging this. And we're going to see a lot of things that happen if we are here at that time, if we're not raptured out. In Ephesians 2:2, we're dealing with this fellow, the prince of the air. This is the guy who caused the fall. And it's his lies and his deceit that created the mess that we're all in right now. Now, I'm going to go through 11 conditions here that were a precedent for the times of Noah, and it brought judgment of God, and those 11 conditions are here today. And I don't have the quote up here, but it's Luke 17:26. It says, as was it in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, and married wives. They were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was in the day of Lot, they did eat, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built it. But the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven, and destroyed them all. Even shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Question is, are these fatal influences now in operation? Yes. I'm going to go through each one, and hopefully, and I'm going to show you where they're at. Yeah, that doesn't work. Okay. Number one, tendency to reject God. In this point here, before Noah, they worshiped God as Elohim, but they did not worship Him as Jehovah. There's a difference there. By that I mean they worship Him as the Creator, but they didn't go before Him as their merciful God to forgive their sins because they had a hard time trying to admit they're wrong, that they were sinful. If there had been repentance, God would have reacted. He always does throughout the ages. And so that particular circumstance began to wane. We're seeing that today, where the church and even people outside the church don't think they do anything wrong. And you can see that they have no guilt or no conscience. So that's happening today. In this point in time, there was also the episode of Cain and Abel, where Cain made an offering that was unacceptable. It was more of a thanksgiving offering, and where Abel actually made a blood offering. The blood offering has to come first before the thanksgiving offering. That's to predict the coming of the Messiah, Christ, who would give his life and his blood on the cross. You'll find I talk a lot about blood in this. If you've got one of the New Age Bibles, they seem to detract that a lot. I'm going to go over that. It's interesting to see how they pull that out. They try to sanitize the Bible. Number two, There's an undue prominence of sex, emphasis on the female as a sexual object, and disregard of the primal law of marriage. I mean, it doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar to see that's going on today. There's the abuse of women sexually, and then there's this whole sexual revolution, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we see that on everything, even our advertisements, even in the most innocent places. Sex sells. And that society at the time of Noah was exactly the same way. Lamech in Genesis was also the first polygamist. We see a high divorce rate, unfortunately, in the church. And these are signs that this is coming on again. Number 3, homosexuality was prominent then and today. That's both in Romans 1:17-32 and Luke 17:26 talks about it. We got real problems with that. They're trying to integrate marriage into a system that's an abomination to God. You think God's going to back down? I don't think so. I think we're going to see a lot of changes in a lot of things. This nation is a Christian nation. When we start pulling away, which we have been for the last 40 years, we're getting further and further away from our source. Get ready, folks. Wake up, church. A rapid progress in mechanical arts and the consequent invention of many devices. Now, this is interesting. This is number 4, and it talks about how we tried to make life so more livable. Now, this is the philosophy of Seth and Cain. They verse each other. They're opposite. Seth wanted to follow God. His philosophy was, we'll wait on God. That's what our hearts are here, I hope, in the body of Christ. The salt of the earth, you wait on God, He shows you, He directs your path. The philosophy of Cain is, let's make a paradise out of earth here today, and so that we can live through this horrible curse that's on us from the Garden of Eden. And they clash, and you'll hear me talk about this Seth and Cain philosophy throughout. The 5th thing is a church apostasy. Now, the church or organized body of believers in God compromise or try to live in accord with the harmony of the world's philosophy at the expense of a relationship with God. Apostasy was defined in Paul and in 2 Timothy 3:1-9. It refers to a total forgetfulness on who God is and what He does for us. And it is also a characteristic of self-deification. You see this a lot in the New Age movement. They deify themselves and totally replace themselves with God. People do that are in science. They are worshiping knowledge. And a lot of times you'll see that in these secret societies I'm going to talk about. That's the main thing they worship. A 6th thing is a vast increase in the population. If you look at the ages of Seth, and these people that lived, we're talking 912 years. Adam was 130 years on the earth, and a moderate increase would be 500,000. So you figure if everything happened 1,000 years after Adam in regards to the flood, there was millions on the earth. In our age, there was a symposium in the 1950s by a group called the Club of Rome. Has anyone ever heard of that before? Wonderful little group that's very humanitarian, not. And and they're a group of interesting people. They're tied. You'll find me tied with the pyramid that we created, and they decided, off of some computer model, that the Earth was in danger by the year 2000 if they didn't do something about the population explosion. So they took upon themselves to do some things which a lot of people didn't vote on, didn't know about, and I'm going to explain that. But first, let me read a quote to you from that. I don't know if I have time to read all the quotes, but this one's very interesting. This is as arrogant an elitist as you can get, and this is your former Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. In many ways, he said, rampant population growth is an even more dangerous and subtle threat to the world than nuclear war. The commitment of government to deal with population issue is, of course, essential. There are only 2 ways of preventing a world with 10 billion inhabitants. Either birth rate drops or the death rate will rise. There is no other way. These are, of course, many ways to make death rates increase in a thermonuclear age, and he goes on to talk about some alternatives. This is the Club of Rome. Here's somebody here that's General Maxwell Taylor, who was the former Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. forces during the Vietnam War. He says, I've already written off more than 1 billion people. These people are in places in Africa, Asia, Latin America. We can't save them. The population crisis and the food supply question dictate that we should not even try. It's a waste of time. These people will suffer from continuous cycles of natural disaster, famine, hunger, flood, drought. Some old fools and young ones may be talking of trying to mount a noble effort to help these people, but they can't be saved. I could tell you I could go all night quoting this, but they came up with 3 alternatives in 1950. And then they created a program called Global 2000. They said by the year 2000 that the population would be so big that the earth couldn't sustain it. I don't know who made that computer model, whether he worked at Sears and Roebuck or what, but it's off. It's year 2005, which tells you it was a lie to begin with. So they decided back then, we're going to try 3 things, or these are the 3 at least they allowed to leak out. The 3 alternatives. You'll hear about alternative 1, 2, and 3 a lot of times on these on the Club of Rome. Alternative 1 was nuclear blast to release heat and pollution. I guess they were afraid that the earth couldn't sustain it, so if they let the heat out off that computer model, it might save the world. And they've done that, and I don't know if it helped. Alternative 2, I want you to listen to very carefully because I will go into some detail about this later. They actually did this. Build underground cities and tunnels in which a secret group, there's always a secret group of people, would survive and carry on the human race. The rest of humanity would be left to fend for themselves. God bless them. And the third was to exploit extraterrestrial technology, which they had access to at this point in time, and I'll show you, and conventional technology, and select a few to leave Earth and establish colonies on other planets. The delaying tactics that they had proposed were birth control, sterilization, an introduction of deadly microbes to control or slow the growth of Earth's population. Does anybody here believe that AIDS was not a manufactured disease? And then they wanted to get rid of the undesirables. Now you can just imagine who they are. You're right on the top of the list if you're a Christian. I mean, they don't like you. And I'm going to tell you that throughout this film and throughout this presentation, that you're number 1 on the list. And in fact, I'll show you that. Number 7 on this list, they reject godly preaching and warnings. There's been 2 people preach ahead of me. There's been others. Schnibbling talked last night, and these people are getting out a warning. At that time, it was Enoch and Noah. They didn't listen. They were blind. First, because, remember, the philosophy of Seth and Cain. They didn't do anything wrong. So that's the way it is today. Number 8, violence and bloodshed. It doesn't take a Rhodes Scholar to see that this is predominant in society today. Just turn on the TV set. Even the advertisements are violent. Number 9, anarchy and lawlessness. Does the name militant Islam ring a bell? They have no purpose in what they do other than bring down society, bring down civilization. What their replacement is take us back to the Middle Ages. I don't think God wants that. 10, buying and selling. This is the overemphasis of commerce. People are so stuck on what their budget is and where the stock market is that they are concerned about the situation, and their whole life is based on that, based on where the stock market is. God doesn't want that. He wants you focused on Him. Number 11, this is the final one. This is a tough one to some Christians, and this is the subject of my talk tonight. The appearance on the earth of beings, sons of God, from the principality of the air and the unlawful intercourse with the daughters of men. Genesis 6:2. In other words, genetic engineering began on this side of the flood, and before that, on the other side of Noah's flood. Before we begin to explain another theory on the sons of God and daughters of men, I need to mention something here about this theory about the sons of God. In every episode that in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that talks about the sons of God, they've always talked about angels. They've never talked about men. And if Moses had intended for us to talk about the sons of Seth, which is the argument, then he would have said the sons of Seth. But there's some teaching out there that's in error, and they're telling you that the sons of Seth and the daughters of Cain came into each other, and what their offspring was the Nephilim. Well, I'll show you pictures of the Nephilim. If they can produce a 12-foot, 6-fingered, 6-toed giant, then I'd like to be their agent. I'll get them in the NBA. But that just didn't happen. I'm sorry, but that philosophy is very weak, and I appreciate the their thoughts on it, but it just doesn't hold any water. The church fathers wrote that specifically that angels were captivated by the love of women and begot children, those who were called giants or Nephilim. And Josephus says in Antiquities of the Jews that the fallen angels and women produced children with superhuman strength. Tradition has it that they were the Greek mythology gods. So there's a precedent for this. Now, before I begin on this other purpose, what the purpose of why Satan is genetically engineering things, I want to make one other point, that this is a very grave sin in the eyes of God. It was so grave that he destroyed it and destroyed everyone but Noah. And I'll explain why Noah was free of this later. But the sin was very grave, and that sin may have been going on in Sodom and Gomorrah also. So these beings, the Nephilim, who translate out tyrant bullies or large beings, giants, the mighty men of renown, were the offspring of fallen angels. Another point I need to make is that there were celestial beings that fell with Lucifer, and some of them were higher above angels as we are below angels. So there is a hierarchy there, and there's some pretty intelligent, almost God with a small g-like beings that fell with him. Now, what's the purpose of Satan to do this? Number one, pollute the genetics of the human race so that it would block the Messiah from coming through. And if he could do that, he almost accomplished that. If he could do that, he wins. Number two, to create a race of giants, but before and after the flood, to block the path of God's chosen people to the promised land. Number three, his tactic is always to kill, steal, and destroy. He operated on fear, as it has exhibited in Numbers 13:33. And in Numbers 13:32, right before that, there's a word there that says akal, A-K-A-L. And what it meant was they were eating up the inhabitants. These beings, these Nephilim, were cannibals. Now, okay, so now I want to go, and there's an excellent book on this if you want to get a book by Stephen Quayle called Aliens and Fallen Giants. And it tells in some detail more than I've got time to talk about. Now I'm going to go back to our time, relatively our time, and tell you how we got into this mess. What I'm about to tell you may sound like something in science fiction. Unfortunately, in all probability, it has happened, and Jesus has warned us about it. Hollywood has made movies to fictionalize the truth so that the population, and more importantly, the people of God, has been antastasized and lulled into a comforting sleep in which they don't or won't operate in God-given powers to oppose what is imminently coming. Now, some of the movies that came out of this is, as you can see, Encounters of the Third Kind, which actually happened in the 50s. E.T., the phone home boy. And earlier, there was Bishop's Wife, Cary Grant in 1947, and Wings of Desire, those in 87. Those were movies that were trying to make it acceptable for us to have affairs with angels. And they made, Hollywood's in this whole plot, folks. Now, I'm going to talk about different individuals that were involved in this. And some who tried to expose these truths have been scrutinized, threatened, bought out, bribed, or worse, murdered when they attempted to reveal to the blind population the cold, unbelievable facts in what has taken place in the USA since 1947. One of these individuals is James Forrestal. He was the Secretary of State, and he wanted to warn the population of what was happening. He was opposed by other insiders in the administration that wanted to maintain secrecy. Here we go, secrecy and secret groups. You'll find this throughout this talk tonight and probably in Schnebling's talk. These secret groups and secret societies gain their power from controlling the populace and keeping them out of the know. They feared that the general population would react adversely and in total shock, and Mr. Forrestal held his ground, was going to come forth with the truth. Being a Christian man, and actually he was one of the few Christian men in Truman's administration, he felt guilty about this. He went to the leaders of Congress, and President Truman found out about that and forced him to resign. And he felt at times he was being watched, so this was an opportunity for those in the know and others to ascribe to him some symptom of paranoia. He suffered a supposed nervous breakdown, and the administration took it upon themselves to have him committed in a mental ward at Bethesda Naval Hospital near Washington. Since they were not family, they had no authority to do this, and his brother came to the rescue on May 22nd, 1949, when he notified them that he was coming to get his brother out. When he arrived, he discovered that James Forrestal had committed suicide. By throwing himself out the window using his bed sheets, or someone threw him out, he fell to his death. This was the first of many casualties of those who attempted to tell the truth and suffer the consequences. Another man was William Cooper. I was at a meeting in Cleveland, and to my left, about right where you're at, William Cooper and his wife, or his attorneys and his wife were there. And they came up to me afterwards and said, everything you said was accurate on this. So this stuff is real. This is not, we're not here doing parlor games. This is serious stuff, Church of Christ. You need to wake up. William Cooper, who was an officer in the Navy intelligence team of the commander of the Pacific Fleet, he had access to top secret information that revealed the greatest secret in U.S. history. Over time, he felt guilty about the cover-up, just like Forrestal did, so he began to speak out, and he wrote a book called Behold the Pale Horse. He'd been warned and threatened. 3 attempts were made on his life, and finally a confrontation with a law enforcement agent got him killed. The list of these go on and on and on. These are heroes. They tried to get the message to you. For whatever reason, it isn't connecting. What is this greatest secret in U.S. history that these men paid their lives to reveal? I'm going to start at the chronological end of the conspiracy against God and His people and go back to the beginning so you can follow the slithering path of the serpent and his brotherhood. In 1947, our country was the strongest country on earth. We had just defeated the Axis power of England, Germany, and I'd like to say France, Germany, Japan, and Italy. And we had in our possession the only atomic bomb and that technology. Our country, which was founded on the principles of the Judeo-Christian ethics, had a national covenant with God, the creator of all things. Our forefathers had established our Constitution on this basis, and we sealed it within God we trust on our money system and in many other ways. The U.S. was instrumental in creating and fulfilling prophecy by establishing a modern-day state of Israel. We fulfilled the prophecies of Ezekiel 36:24, Isaiah 11:12, and 14:2, and Jeremiah 50:19-20. God rewarded our nation with prosperity, prestige, and power. We were on course to change the world in ways that no other nation in history had. Then something strange began happening. 16 crash discs or down circular discs were discovered, 13 of which were on our own borders, 1 in Arizona, 11 in New Mexico, and 1 in Nevada. Along with that were 65 alien bodies, and 1 live alien was recovered. One famous crash scene took place near Roswell, New Mexico. This is a recreation of that on July 4th, 1947. Over the previous week, these craft were flying across the radar screens, creating blips that were traveling 3,000 miles an hour. They were defying the laws of thermodynamics. They could take a right turn going 3,000 miles an hour, and the Air Force was very much concerned about this. The 509th Air Force base there was the only base in the United States that had tactical nuclear weapons, and they were probing our defenses. As described by Colonel Phillips J. Corso on the night of the crash, and I'm reading this verbatim out of the day after Roswell. You need to pick that book up, Christians. If you're Bereans, you will, because it tells you the facts. He was there. He oversaw a lot of this. He was underneath General Twining, who was able to reverse engineer a lot of this stuff that came out of Roswell. But what he stated, he said, at the night when this happened, he said something phenomenal happened. This thing was racing across the skies, and then all of a sudden, he called it this specific. Now listen to these words. This is what's in his book. A biblical display of thunder and lightning. Something happened there, hit this thing, and the craft arced to the lower left quadrant of the screen and then seemed to disappear for a moment, then exploded in a brilliant white fluorescence. It suddenly evaporated right before the eyes of those in the control tower and tumbled to the ground. This was reminiscent in my mind of Jesus' statement in Luke 10:18 about witnessing that Satan's fall to earth from heaven was like lightning. The crash site was presumed to be northwest of Roswell, and the military frantically mobilized a crash retrieval team to locate and secure the crash site. They believed it was an enemy craft. They thought it was the Soviet Union that pierced their defenses. And so they raced over there. When they arrived, they were shocked. It was at night. And they found this. This is a recreation, but they found something similar to this. It was an egg-shelled shaped craft that was embedded at a 45-degree angle in the side of an embankment. It was still simmering from the heat, but was essentially intact. There was a general sense of amazement. And you'll hear that constantly. They're amazed with all this stuff going on. The craft had torn a seam inside its, right, you can see it there in the craft. There was a seam inside or along the diameter of it, and 5 occupants, 4 to 4.5 feet tall, had evacuated. 3 of them were dead. 1 of them was alive, and the other one died when he was shot because he didn't heed a halt warning. The live alien, according to Corso, Colonel Philip Corso and others, was given the name E.B. Does anybody remember the movie E.T.? Hollywood plays with your minds. That actually happened. EB means extraterrestrial biological entity. And you'll find EB constantly talked about by Colonel Corso. This live alien, by the way, was kept alive until he became ill and died in June 1952. The information supposedly extracted from it over the years was startling, but he had a tendency to lie often, so that might tell you which side of the podium he's on. Okay, we're in this mess right now, and President Truman, before I do that, I want to show you this. We got a lot of information up here from the Freedom of Information Act. This is an FBI document that talks about crashes in New Mexico. And some of these you can get on Linda Howe's book, Alien Harvest, which I think is excellent. She did a very good job of trying to get to the middle of this problem. This is an alleged alien autopsy. Let me stop here and say something. If you don't know this now, you should know it, because the government, or i.e. Hollywood, and all that's connected with it, will tell you a lie long enough, you'll start believing it as the truth. Hitler started this, and they found it worked very well. They can tell you the truth long enough, and you'll believe it's a lie. Both sides work. You'll find this constantly throughout this whole episode here. This is an actual, I believe, autopsy of what they look like. And I'll go into that in a little bit detail about what they are and who they are and what their physiology is. This may well have been a picture of E.B. He's on the left, he's got a mask, he's not doing real well. And on the right, it looks like he's running for office. He may win somewhere. This was their first effort trying to cover up this whole episode. They called it a weather balloon. And if a weather balloon can go 3,000 miles an hour and take right turns, then I want to ride on it. Here we are with President Truman. He was the president at that point in time. He was briefed on Roswell incident September 24th, 1947. And as a result, there were several groups he created. What do we do when we don't understand what's going on? Well, we try to get intelligence. We tried to do that after Al-Qaeda attacked us. Truman didn't know what to do with this information of all these things falling down around him. And so he began authorizing different organizations. He started, the first organization here was Majestic 12. This is a Freedom of Information Act, document, and so you can see that he signed off, and he had, I think this was directed to Mr. Forstall, so this was before he died. Now, before I show that scene, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that were going on here. He created several secret societies. Some of these you know about, some you don't. In December of 1947, he created Project Sign, which studied the phenomena. And then in 1948, he started Project Grudge, and that went into Blue Book. There was 2 parts of Blue Book. There was a part that you saw on TV, which was a disinformation group. Then there was a part that actually worked inside of the UFO phenomena. And out of that came Project Pounce, P-O-U-N-C-E, and I have a chart that shows this. And off of this, there was different other groups created, the secret groups. And actually, I'll show you, they created some of these, and they're still with us today. Now, at this point in time, there were some other things happening. On February 13th, 1948, on the mesa near Aztec, New Mexico, a disc-shaped craft was discovered, and on March 25th, 1948, a 100-foot diameter craft had crashed on the White Sands Proving Ground. A total of 17 alien bodies were recovered from 2 craft, but a disturbing discovery was made of a large number of human body parts stored within the confines of the craft. As you can imagine, fear and panic took over from everyone that was in the know. Because of this lack of control and the secrecy became almost paramount at this point in time. And everyone was afraid in the government that needed to know that there would be an Orson Welles War of the World public hysteria. And so we began seeing these things take place. There is one point before I talk about this slide here. The secrecy took teeth when in December of '53 the Joint Chiefs of Staff issued an Army, Navy, Air Force publication number 146 that made it a severe crime under the Espionage Act, punishable for up to 10 years in prison and $10,000 fine for disclosing classified information concerning terrestrials, extraterrestrials. The hanging noose of secrecy and denial kept getting more tighter. About this time, to add insult to injury, we have this little episode when a whole squadron of them flies over Washington, D.C. And because of that, there was no answer. The military just stood there helplessly watching, and there's pictures of this episode happening. How frustrating and how humbling it must have been for our GIs to see this take place and our military to see this. And yet, an even stranger phenomena was taking place. This supposedly advanced civilization with disc-shaped aircraft that defied the laws of gravity and had our scientists in shocked awe were tumbling helplessly out of the sky as if there was a cosmic conflict. Someone or something was protecting us. I believe it was the same benevolent God of the universe who had watched over us during the years we fought in the Second World War. Our government, however, was more concerned and in awe of these crashed ruins than of some supposedly advanced civilization and the rather obvious fact that some higher power was in control of this situation. We had seen this principle of protection before. It had been spoken to us by Jesus Christ, Yeshua, 2,000 years ago when he said, "I will never forsake you or leave you." It was being applied to this Christian nation. Biblically, the same principle has been written of before. In Daniel 4:13, 14, where a watcher or a divine being or guard would protect the nations they were assigned to. The archangel Michael, for instance, protected Israel. That's in Daniel 10:11. And according to Jude, there has been throughout history a tumultuous war or a cosmic conflict that pits the divinely directed sons of God on one side and the fallen sons of God on the other. Truman had been milling over everything happening, and he decided that our allies needed to be informed of this. But he needed to form a super secret group that would oversee and control the world affairs and keep this under its hat. This is where the Bilderbergers came from. They met in September, in Switzerland in '52. And they had been handed immense powers to control our affairs since then, ostensibly to protect us. They were also there to try to put the lid in their individual governments about this crisis taking place. Now, in 1953, Dwight Eisenhower takes over the presidency. He's elected, but he hasn't assumed office till '54. They hand him information about this, but he had also been briefed on this previous to this because he was the commander-in-chief of the forces. This is the first document you'll see with the top secret magic in it. But this is the whole, probably, summary of everything I've told you. We're complete here with a list of who was in the first Majestic 12 group. I'm just going to scan through this, but this is the information that I've told you about. This comes from Linda's Howe book. It also comes from Freedom of Information. It talks about the different episodes and occurrences of these craft. In other words, there's some strange phenomena going on, Mr. President. You need to know about this. Unfortunately, one of his best buddies was Nelson Rockefeller, our good old friend. Now, Nelson had supported him through his election, and he's the one that actually had talked him into coming into the presidency and leaving his retirement and golfing. And so he was a good friend, but unfortunately, Nelson Rockefeller is also a member of the CFR and the Illuminati. Eisenhower, we know, was a member of the CFR, so they were friends in that regards. This was like hiring the ravenous wolf to guard the hen house, since Rockefeller was both members. This may have been the beginning of a marriage made in hell. The secret society Illuminati had lusted after power and control for centuries, and this technologically advanced beings that were flying down and crashing in the ground could be used to fulfill their destiny and bring back the new Babylon in a form of a one-world government format. That's where we start hearing about one-world government that comes from them. If you're a novice at these secret societies, CFR wants to obliterate boundaries, basically. Now, the Illuminati want to go one step further. They historically go back to the Freemasons and their connection to ancient Babylon beliefs. The major tenet of their cult are the abolition of private property, the elimination of religion, i.e. the ACLU, the elimination of nation states, the belief that the illumination emanates from a supreme being who desired perfection for the world. They want to reshape the world by taking control of individual countries one by one. They believe they can communicate or channel with unknown supervisors who have inspired knowledge to initiates throughout the ages. You will hear me constantly go back with communing and channeling. That's what a lot of these peoples and civilizations did to get in problems with these fallen sons of God. They are part of Satan's brotherhood, elite brotherhood, who effectively use the old Hegelian dialectic thesis, antithesis approach. They have actually got the technique down to divide and conquer almost to perfection. And they follow Satan's path very, very close. Here's some quotes from a couple CFR members in 1950 while speaking this is James Warburg, while speaking in front of the Senate Relations Committee, when he blurted out in anger, quote, "We shall have world government whether or not you like it, or by consent or conquest." This here is a picture of their insignia, and you'll constantly see this pyramid show up on everything tied with them. The top of the insignia shows a triangle with an eye in it. Does anybody here know what that eye represents? That's the eye of who? Lucifer. Right. Very good. Got a smart class here. Now, around it, of course, is a new world order, or the new order of the ages. And that's there. And you'll notice that it hasn't come down on the pyramid yet. There's a gap between that. I'm going to show you a picture of the flag or the insignia of the aliens, and it's a triangle with 3 lines running through it. And the 3 lines running through it are orange. And the abductees have said that they are an ungodly orange or unearthly orange. And they say it's just beautiful. And then inside the triangle, it's dark blue. It has some significance, but I don't know what the significance of it. We couldn't find it out. So anyway, that's the philosophy of the Illuminati. Another fellow, David Spengler, says, and he's a director of the Planetary Initiative of the United Nations, states that no one will enter the New World Order unless he or she will make a pledge to worship Lucifer. No one will enter the New Age unless he takes a Luciferian initiation. Okay. Up to this time, they have been trying to communicate through a project called Sigma with these beings that were buzzing the White House. And what they did finally was they took a binary computer and was able to communicate with them. And they arranged a meeting at this air base here, Muroc, which I want you to remember that name, M-U-R-O-C Air Base. And they arranged it on February 20 and 21st of 1954 between Eisenhower and some of his administration and some people to feel out or scope how society would react to this. Now, Ike flew out to Palm Springs, California, and all of a sudden, the 2 days that he was there, he turned up missing for a couple days. And they used the excuse that he had a tooth cap, a broken tooth cap, so they had him at a dentist's office for 2 days, which is a little flimsy. But the other part of that that's flimsy is he just got back a week earlier from a quail hunting expedition in shooting vacation in Georgia. So this has a lot of credibility that this happened. Now, I want to make a point here. If just 30% of what I'm telling you is accurate, we got problems. I think it's more like 75 or 80. Take the information, Bereans. Take the information, body of Christ. Research it. Study it. Wake up, church. Things are going to happen fast. There was a group of leaders and were invited, and one of these leaders was a guy by the name of Gerald Light, a well-known metaphysician. I want to read to you a letter he wrote to a fellow by the name of Meade Lane, director of Borderline Science Research Foundation. This kind of gives you a feel or sensation of what the excitement was. He says, "My dear friend, I have just returned from Muroc." By the way, Muroc, does anybody know it's the base name today? They changed it shortly after this, huh? Yeah, very good. Very good. Edwards Air Force Base. "The report is true, devastatingly true. I made the journey in company with Frank and Allen of Hearst Papers and Edwin Norris of Brookings Institute and Bishop McIntyre of L.A. By the way, Bishop McIntyre became Cardinal McIntyre and was working with the Vatican. When we were allowed to enter the restricted section after about 6 hours in which we were checked on every possible item, event, incident, and aspect of our personal public lives, I had the distinct feeling that the world had come to an end with fantastic realism. For I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion as they realized that their own world had indeed ended with such finality as to beggar description. The reality of the other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realms of speculation and made a rather painful part of consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group. During my 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of craft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance and permission of the Etherians. He calls them the Etherians. I call them the fallen sons of God, and you'll see why a little bit later here. I have no words to express my reaction. It has finally happened. It is now a matter of history. Now listen to this carefully. He says, President Eisenhower, as you may already know, was spirited over from Iraq one night during his visit to Palm Springs recently. It is my conviction that he will ignore the terrific conflict between various authorities and go directly to the people via radio and television. 1954, you guys weren't even born. Some of you, I know you weren't. You're just too young. All of you out here, even the ones sleeping. If the impasse continues much longer, for what I could gather, an official statement to the country is being prepared for delivery about the middle of May. Guess what? We never heard that, did we? We never saw that. He talks about these 5 crafts, and then he talks about their emblem. He was struck by this same thing I'm going to show you a little bit later, that their sign. That insignia, that sign, fits perfectly on top of that pyramid. Think about that, brothers in Christ and sisters in Christ. I'm going to read to you the Greada Treaty. This is what we got from 3 people. Don Phillips, a former Air Force serviceman who actually saw the treaty. William Cooper, Navy Intelligence, and Phil Schneider, an engineer who worked on the underground bases for the government. I'll go into that in some detail. Every one of those people gave their lives to get information to you. They're all dead. The treaty stated that the alien representatives, I call them sons of God, would negotiate in our affairs and we would not interfere in theirs. We would keep their presence on Earth a secret, and they would furnish us with advanced technology. They didn't. And would help us in our technological developments. They didn't. They would not make any treaty with any other Earth nation. They did. You can guess who they made a treaty with. In return, they could abduct humans on a limited and periodic basis for the purpose of medical examination and monitoring of our development with the stipulation that humans would not be harmed. They did harm us and would be returned to the point of abduction with the memory of the event erased. They did do that. The alien nation, or the fallen sons of God, would furnish Majesty 12, the group overseeing this project, with a list of all human contacts and abductees on a regular scheduled basis. They did that when they wanted to. Let me read something. They were so technologically advanced over us, we had no choice. We were coerced into that. But they should have stayed with God and not backed down and told them to get their things and get out of this country in the name of Jesus. But again, there wasn't any strong Christians in the administration. I don't think there really has been since. It was also agreed, now this is real important, I want you to listen to some of this. It was also agreed that each nation would receive ambassadors of the other for as long as the treaty remained in force. It was further agreed that the alien nation, the United States, would exchange 16 personnel with the purpose of learning about each other. The alien guests would remain on Earth. The human guests would travel to the alien point of origin for a specified period of time, then return, at which point a reverse exchange would be made. I bet they're lizard bait right now. Reenactment of this event was dramatized in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now, the tip-off on that is Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Cooper runs across his name on some other secret documents which he signed on. They were called Project Grudge, which was one of Truman's documents. He ran across his name along with a guy by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Friend. So Hynek he was on both, and he helped them develop this Encounters of the Third Kind meeting, trying to recreate maybe what really happened. He's also the famous guy that everything that was looked like something like an extraterrestrial craft was called swamp gas. So he said that constantly, if you remember. Now, this is the important part. It was agreed that bases would be constructed underground for the use of alien nation, and that 2 bases would be constructed for joint use of alien nation and the United States government. Exchange of technology would take place in a jointly occupied basis. These alien bases would be constructed under Indian reservations in the Four Corners areas of Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. One would be constructed in an area known as Dreamland. This is the essence of it. You didn't get it. No one saw it. No one was notified of it. Therefore, actually, this is essentially an illegal contract on a constitutional government because the Congress needed a 3/4 vote and they didn't get it. And we were under coercion. There was nothing we could do about it. And so they sold out. They would have taken great courage to stand up and say, get your craft, get your people, and get off our planet. 47 is a pivotal date. 1947 is probably the biggest date in U.S. history. Besides, it compares with 70 A.D. for the Israelites. 70 A.D. was a change in their life. This period of time was a change of ours. We pushed God away, the God of our nation who we put our trust into. From that point on, these things began to happen. The country's destiny began to gradually deteriorate. The country suffered an assassination of John F. Kennedy, who was getting ready to release this information, and had Majesty 12 on its knees, practically, because he was going to say, if you're going to do this by this, or we're going to have some problems. And a costly defeat in Vietnam, do you remember that? Unless you're reading history revisionists. These things happen. A gradual decrease in church attendance with a change in our view of God. Books like Situation Ethics helped the liberal New Age ideas sprout the satanic wings in colleges. And education became a cesspool of socialistic and occult doctrines. Abortion became legalized, and the bloodbath of the preborn became an accepted concept by those who wanted to be forward thinkers and in the mainstream. The health of the general population began to decline, and the specter of cancer and AIDS, venereal disease ran rampant, as well as other diseases, as if the curse of Egypt had befallen us. The media and the entertainment industry was gradually taken over by the elite groups who were in alliance with the same secret societies and groups who kept us in the dark. As the increase in drugs, both illegal and legal, matched by the increase in the death rate from this diseases, it was apparent that we had gone down the wrong path. Now listen, I'll say this constantly tonight. Every nation who has followed these evil fallen sons of God in history have gone down to death, defeat, and destruction. Every single one. The illegal treaty at Morocco between the representatives of the fallen sons of God and the elements of our one world government, i.e. Illuminati, was a marriage made in hell. And it creates the scenario of Revelations 13:4 in the last days. We are not facing friendly space brothers, but instead an ancient enemy who God's people have fought throughout human history. Their deception can be traced from before Noah's flood to the Tower of Babel, from ancient civilizations to Nazi Germany, and to our own present day. These are Satan's elite troops, and they are here to fulfill the last great delusion. Now, how did it start? At this point, I'm going to go back in history. We're going to trace the slithering snake's trail. As you know, Lucifer was the light bearer. He was the anointed cherub who fell due to his pride. This is a recreation or a picture of him. And this is when he was beautiful and under God's dominion. Remember, he was cast down from heaven after a great war between Michael and the warrior angels of God. What took place from that point on is he plotted a plan to take control of the universe. Specifically, some people speculate that he may have been the Lord over the earth at that time, and I wish I had time to go into that, but you can probably find some work on that on some other speakers and other tapes back here. This battle took place, and I want you to notice that Michael's cast him down, and he's a reptile. He's a dragon. A lot of the creatures that we are fighting in this, some of them, one category is reptilian, and there seems to be a connection between that and this. There's also on these uniforms, sometimes they will see a picture of a snake or a dragon, and it's winged, and they'll see a triangle through it and other things like that. They're the Brotherhood of the Snake, and there's actually secret societies are tied to that. According to the Scriptures, he was a cherub, a four-faced entity. Now, he's not an angel. You understand that he's a cherub. That's a separate category. He had four faces. He had the face of a lion, a face of a human, a face of an eagle, and a face of a lion, human, eagle, and a what? A bull. Why didn't I say bull? That's the one he predominantly is worshipped by ancient cultures. But his faces he can like metamorphose or shapeshift. This is the episode I want to talk about in regards to Adam and Eve. Lucifer had now become Satan and had tempted the fall of man with the knowledge of good and evil. Now you got to remember this, that this tree of good and evil, that evil pre-existed their sin that they committed. So evil had to be in existence before they sinned. There had to be something to tempt them. Lucifer's fall happened before they sinned. So there's some speculation that there was things going on long before they were created. Maybe even the earth had another age, and it suffered punishment because of his rebellion. There's a theory on that. And man chose to accept knowledge rather than God's will. Here we have the beginning of the debate between Seth and Cain. Seth wants to wait on God. Cain wants the knowledge now, wants to become like God, use knowledge. These beings offered it to us even then. Now here's the episode where the angels in Genesis 2:3 left their first estate and mated with the daughters of men. Their offspring became the Nephilim. Now, again, the hierarchy of celestial beings that fell will die like men. That's in Psalms 82. I don't have time to read that, but that's not directed to man. If you'll read that, if you're going to die like men, it's assumed that men already died. What are they talking about? They're not talking about men. They're talking directly about the sons of God. Something happened that they acquired death by mating with the offspring of men. Now, there's 2 or 3 theories, and I think Snibling I hope he gave one last night. I don't have the tape. His theory seems to have a lot of credence. And the theory is this, that Adam and Eve had no blood flowing through their system when they were in the Garden of Eden, right? Okay, because we know that Eve was created bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh from Adam. They had probably light flowing through them, an eternal thing, things that would not be destroyed, light. And another factor I want you to watch on this is Adam and Eve were created to live for eternity, right? They were sexual beings. They could have sex through eternity. That didn't cause the fall. So they had things to create. God wanted them to procreate eternal beings. When they sinned, and I've heard different interpretations of this, but whatever they ate, and that sin created blood. And blood causes genetic transfers of that sin. So when these angels, these sons of God, which they're male, they have organ parts, they were attractive to the people in Sodom and Gomorrah. They didn't have wings, they looked very attractive to the Sodom and Gomorrah people. In the gay, especially the homosexuals there, they wanted to have relations with them. So they have the parts in their body. They were created, just like Adam and Eve were created to live for eternity in eternal bodies, but they committed sin. Lucifer lied to them. He said the same lie to them that he said to Adam and Eve when he said, "You will not die." Well, Psalms 82 says they will, and they did. This is the episode of Noah, before the flood, the pre-Noah flood. And at this point, the world had become so wicked. And there was Nephilim walking around, giants 12 foot tall. The wickedness was so bad that God, in His mercy, couldn't even tolerate it. Now, Adam and Eve probably died some years before this. I think they made it almost within 100, 200 years of this. So the world just had gone, you know what, in a handbasket. Noah was exceptional. When the Bible says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of God, of the Lord," and these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generation. That term perfect translates from the Hebrew Tamlym, which means bodily perfection, not moral perfection, because we know that all have sinned. It says so in the Word of God. We've all fallen short. And since Noah is a member of the human race, he fell short too. It's talking about, or let's say it's used 46 times of sacrificial animals, which had to be pure and perfect stock. It means Noah and his family were the only Adamites genetically left that had a bloodline the Messiah could come through. The rest of them have been polluted in some manner. Now, blood work, I work with dark field analysis of blood, and there are some things in blood that are transferred, including the genetics. My theory on this is that the Nephilim and these fallen sons of God were having they were mating with everybody. I think maybe we could even say a virus may have been activated that attached to the DNA code. I wouldn't be putting it past it, so that everything was imperfect. These people were not themselves. Now that doesn't mean they weren't looking human, but they looked human, but they had this genetic flaw in it. The only one left perfect was Noah.
Okay, what I realized and what I've discovered over the years is this is in particular pertains to Area 51. At Area 51, there are a lot of dealings with alien extraterrestrial life, and also on Area 51, extraterrestrial life, and also on Area 51 on this base, which is underground. It's extensive underground system and levels, about 14 levels. They not only deal with extraterrestrials, but in order to hide what they are doing and hide the fact that we have a very advanced technology, that there are a lot of these craft, flying saucers, that they are actually engineering and putting out. We have that much of an advanced technology. It is not coming, all of it, from aliens. But it settles, or it suits them just fine for us to think that it's all alien technology. We have the technology, and we've had it for a long time. And it's far more advanced than you realize. The grays that I saw there on the base were under human control. The reason that they were under human control is because they were manufactured. They were called cybers. P-S-I-B-E-R-S. That's what they were referred to as cybers. And the cybers were manufactured with the help of genetic material from dolphins. They have the ability to communicate at a psychic level with other subjects because dolphins are renowned and known for having this ability due to scalar waves. That is what these cybers have. They are now, since being manufactured, they are cloned out. They're under control of human beings. They're not always perfect in what they do or how they perform. they are able to be in these spacecraft. I believe that it has been the experience of a number of abductees or a number of people that have come in contact with grays, that these are the grays that they're coming in contact with. And I saw them there. Something else that I've seen in the underground bases are a lot of experimentation using different animals, using different alien life form, and using human beings trying to manufacture something that is pretty mutated. And a lot of what I saw there did not live very long because they were failure experiments. And when, due to them not living very long, they were experimented on. There were live vivisections being done. And there was no medication being used for pain. So one of the things that I did there, since I was trained to have the psychic capabilities, and I'm not the only one that was used in this way, there were a lot of others used in this way, was to be there present while they were cutting up one of their mutations, a living creature, and trying to psychically prevent this creature or these creatures from feeling pain. So I was present during many of these vivisections, and the whole thing is pretty horrific. But this was something else then again that goes on. It goes on there all the time. And I wasn't there to do that as, oh, well, I'm irreplaceable. I was there because it was enhancing my training. So it's like killing two birds with one stone. Something else that I would like to bring out is there were rituals going on at these bases. There were rituals that involved alien beings and human beings, and it was going on there all the time. I haven't really ever talked with any other survivors of this. I haven't heard anyone else talk about it. These are what I remember. This is an alien, this is an example of one that I saw there on the base. This was not a manufactured creature. This was an extraterrestrial on the base. These in particular were not very nice. And they were usually accompanied by military. But these were something that I saw there. They didn't seem to like to be here either. Okay, now what I'm getting into, I would like to talk about our little exchange program with Russia. When I was 5, some of the training that I had took place over in Russia. And we have a partnership with the Soviet Union, or with Russia now, that has been around a long time. The whole time that we had this supposed Cold War with Russia, we were learning from them or partners with them. They were very advanced in their psychic training, psychic experimentation. There were some places here that were associated with that. And one of those places that I was also involved with was over at UCLA. It was a parapsychology program. That was run by Thelma Moss and Jolly West. And, excuse me, the MK Ultra labs are still over at UCLA. Their parapsychology program supposedly was shut down. I did run into someone in the early 90s who was telling me about some other things about it, and that Barry Taft was running it at that point. But I have a lot of memories about UCLA parapsychology unit there being involved with the psychic experimentation that was going on in Russia. This particular picture deals with what I saw there. This was a uniformed KGB officer that was taking something or standing there while one scientist was talking to another. And from my memories, this was taking place in Leningrad. This was a picture that I did. I had a really violent, terrible memory about being drowned in ice water, purposely there. What was happening was that they were using ice water, and the water was very important in this, to cause near-death experiences. And that I know of, this happened to me 3 times before I could complete the experiment or the assignment that was given to me. And the assignment for me was to go out of my body and in my astral body go to another room, a specified room, and go in there and pick up a pencil sitting on the table and make a mark on the piece of paper. There was a KGB officer present, sitting there at the table. It was being recorded on a camera, and it took me 3 tries to get this right. And it was very interesting because at one point I was in therapy with a therapist who was internationally. And it was very interesting because at one point I was in therapy with a therapist who was internationally known for working in this area with people that have been ritually abused and mind controlled. And he told me that he'd had 3 other clients that reported this same kind of experimentation. I hadn't really spoken to anyone about my memories, so I found this very interesting. This is another example of the kind of thing that happens on bases that I went through and many others have gone through. I had nothing in my life to compare this with. I didn't pull it up from anywhere. I didn't see any books. There are no books dealing with this. Now maybe some people are writing some. There's nothing to compare this to. There were no TV shows that dealt with this. And there's just nowhere that I could have pulled this up from. These were very hard pictures to draw because I had to deal with everything when I was drawing these. This is a picture that I did for the therapist. It was dealing with my feelings about all of this. None of these pictures, I might add, are done after 1995. Parts of them you can't see. I've dated every single one of them, but you cannot see the exact dates on these, unfortunately. There was a lot of programming that was being done with strobe lighting, with being hooked up to EEG machinery, EEG biofeedback. There was a lot of electrodes placed on other parts of the body, recording nerve impulses. There were drugs that were being given. There were earphones so that you were hearing different tones, different sounds. And there was a type of a device placed on the head that, along with that, where you actually heard it through your mastoid bones in your head. And this is an example of what came out that had been done to the inside of me. It is how a system is being set up. And it's very interesting because at the time I did not know what tritones were. I didn't know if it was anything at all. But this is what they were using. They were using tritones to program. And tritones are two specific notes that when they are played together produce a third sound which will alter your brainwave activity. And there are a lot of different variations on the tritones that can cause you a lot of pain, or they can cause you to feel very good. But this was part and parcel what they were using with the programming. And this was a picture that I had drawn of how they were what I call gridding the brain. And they gridded the brain in order to have control over the different parts of the brain, and what they were going to do was stimulate some part of your brain and cause you to react in a situation without knowing why you did it. Or you don't remember what you said, what you did, or you're carrying out preset commands. And that is what gridding is about. Okay, now this I included because what they were also programming in at these bases, this was an example of not just Greek letters, which were used in programming, but Ogham alphabet. And Ogham is used in the cult, and it is Druidic. This was being done on the bases. And a lot of it was learning how, through stimulation, to use your fingers, because fingers and hands are used in communicating Ogham. And this is responsible for what has been, it's part of what is called hand signaling. And different people have talked about being hand signaled. Ogham is used for that purpose. So they were doing these ritual things there. And unfortunately, you can't see the writing at the bottom. Well, it's hard to see it. Down there it says, I have no age, I span the ages. And this was something that came out in 1989. It was the start of some of these drawings. This was a part of me that I called Keeper, and he was the keeper of the flame. And the flame being Illuminati flame. And this was a part of me that kept a lot of occult knowledge. And this was something created on a base. It was created in a military base. It was created at China Lake Naval Weapons Station. So then these others started coming out. I'd never seen any occult material that I know of. I've never read books. I'd never seen anything even near it on TV. This was another one dealing with deity Astaroth. And I didn't know anyone else that was even drawing anything like this. And Astaroth is an ancient deity. It goes back to Babylon. And you note that the eyes are blue, but the pupils are slit. I have this in a lot of the drawings. And there is blood on this one because this one consumes human blood. This was another one that I can't, it didn't go all the way in the frames. Originally it was backwards. It was written backwards. And it was about the Great Earth Mother. And I had never heard of it when it came up in my memory. I never heard of the Great Earth Mother. I didn't know what the Great Earth Mother was. I didn't travel with people that talked like that. I mean, you don't have to be a cult to talk about the Great Earth Mother or the Mother as the Earth as the Great Mother. I just had never heard of it. So when these came out, it was at the time I didn't know what it was. What I understand it to be now, there is a Vesica Pisces there, which is very important. It represents creation. It represents creation from the cosmos. And this represents the Earth Mother and the moon that travels around the Earth 13 times in a year. So this has to do with that. Again, created on a military base. Not because it's a cover. This was another one that came up. And my understanding is that Lu is Druidic. My understanding about the other words are that they go back to Sumerian. They have Sumerian roots. Okay. Okay, this was another one that came out. It was about the child and the mother and the crone, the triple goddess. Again, via our wonderful military bases that apparently do just mind control for governmental things. Okay, what I want to just make a point about right now is that I had drawings I'm not ready to deal with yet that I didn't bring here because I still have a hard time with them. And one of them involves something I did. I don't even know why it got saved. I did as a child. I was in second grade. It is a drawing of a dragon. I don't feel like I have to prove that I drew it, but I did draw it. And what I've been challenged about a lot is that, well, these are holographic images. They don't exist. They're all in the mind. They're fairy tales. They're not real. And I have had to hear that a lot. Since I've seen also reptilians on the military bases, besides seeing them in rituals off bases and rituals on bases, I wanted to try and find some evidence that there were pictures that were recorded before. This happens to be 6,000-year-old figurines that were discovered at Acambaro, Mexico. And these are women that are playing with little dragons. And what is interesting about this is that I had told David Icke in an interview that in the dungeon of this castle in Alsace-Lorraine, where Pindar lives, or sometimes is at, that there were dragons in the basement, little ones that were considered pets. And I found this, and I'm sure that this is not the only example, but these things do exist, and they can be seen in other places, and they can be seen today. Okay, this one is Phoenician. It's Archangel Michael, who was Tazmikikau, who is battling the dragon. And the wings, I mean, this one was later to become Archangel Michael. The wings are down on the legs. Right there. And then the fire is between them, and that has become the Illuminati flame. But that was a symbol for fire. The Phoenicians knew of the dragons, they knew of the reptilians, and their work depicted them quite a lot. Okay, this one is another one. The intercessor, who is a priest, that guy right there, is pleading to Indara, who became Saint Michael. That guy right there, for the life of the man about to be sacrificed to the dragon. That one right there. And the symbol above the man signifies death. And the goat signifies the solar deity. Again, Illuminati symbolism. Okay, this one I have to show you has been known as a Phoenician symbol. It is an early form of the swastika. What it is that the dragon became a serpent, the same serpent in the Bible, in Genesis, to disguise the fact that it was actually a dragon, so that the enemy is a snake or Satan. And this started occurring with the Phoenicians, and it started because by that time the reptilians had come there to be with the Phoenicians and so-called save them. And this started being covered up then. And pleading with your life, or pleading for someone's life for a dragon, for the dragon not to eat them or kill them, became St. George battling the dragon. And it's become wound up in all kinds of stories. It's come into the Arthur legends, the Grail legends. It's us against them. We're all one. It's us against them. And the dragons are mythical. The dragons are not mythical. And they hide the fact that they are here. So the point that I'm trying to make today is that the military bases are used as a lot more than just simply military bases. They're doing quite a trade with innocent people. And they are involved in the occultic activity. They also are all connected underground, and that is how a lot of people get from one place to another without anyone ever knowing it. They're also involved with ritualistic activity. And they are not instilled memories either. They're definitely not. What is happening is that both things are true. People are seeing and experiencing rituals there not because it's being used as a cover. It is happening because the people themselves that are in charge are doing this kind of activity. And the rituals happening in Area 51 are being done also because there is alien life there they are also tend to be ritualistic themselves. There are reptilians on the base at Area 51. I am sure that some people have seen them there. It would be impossible not to if you were able to be at the right place in the right time and be able to watch. And it is occurring on other bases also. I'm going to show you one last picture because I do have something to say about the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, this is a picture of a ritual portraying the carrying around of the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia. And this, I understand, is done every year. What I have known, and there are some others that know also, that the Ark, the true Ark, is not in Ethiopia. It never was in Ethiopia. It's at a place in Egypt. No, it's not the Great Pyramids. It's a place that's been used in the past. It was a temple that was erected to perform rituals, and it's associated with Illuminati. And the Ark is there. I have a friend who has told me about these same rituals being held in Japan. I have a friend who has told me about these same rituals being held in Japan, and that they have the Ark there. And it is associated with the Emperor of Japan, and that there are stone circles there, and that there seems to be an association with the Phoenicians. That is my understanding. It's very interesting that this same symbology, same story is also over in Japan with the Ark. Japan plays a very important part in this whole thing with the Illuminati, and they have downplayed it. It's been kept very quiet over here in the United States. I had, when I was involved with them, the Illuminati, and very mind controlled by them, been to Japan a few times and dealing with being around the Emperor at the time, who was, forgive me if I am not pronouncing this correctly, but Akihito. And they are very much also a part of the Illuminati. And they're very important right now at this time period. They hold a very important key to what is going to happen. And I will talk about that in the workshop. If anyone had questions about that, Brian and myself will both talk about it in the workshop. They also hold the key to Atlantis. At this point in time, I've been asked here a lot. I think that I'll address this. I have been asked why are you still alive, and why aren't they doing anything to you? What do you think they have planned for you? And what I believe is, because the harassment pretty much stopped a couple of years ago, I believe I've gotten to the point to where there's not much more they can do. I still would expect anything, but I have been very busy just trying to put my life back together in a normal sense. I still sometimes talk to survivors on the phone. I have people call me. I don't feel that I'm very helpful to them because the problems are huge and myriad, and I can't help them over the phone. It's very complex. But I still now, I keep up on reading about these places. I've put a lot of my memory work aside for right now. And I hope to take it up again someday. But right now it's just watching all of this, watching the way the programming has changed. The programming is very, very complex now. It's very sophisticated. They no longer need to use programmers in the same way that they did when I was young. There seems to be a lot of association with military bases from people that I've heard, talked to. There seems to be a lot of association with alien activity. Some of it, I believe, is a screen. Some of it is not. There are a lot of people that have talked about being involved in rituals, but I think that a lot of people, from what I see, have a hard time with, oh, well, there were rituals, and oh, well, there's alien activity, and oh, well, there are military bases. So it's something that is not, I haven't come to a conclusion myself. I know what I was involved in. I'm still listening to other people and what they're involved in. But I'm really very busy right now, so I don't have much time as I did before. They use residences in neighborhoods. It's not always military bases. They use residents for upkeep and maintenance of people. At this point, I think I've said about all I have to say on the subject for now. So if anyone has any questions, I'm willing to take them. I should say that we have you line up to the microphone over on the side and state your name and your question.
I am Scott. I talked to you yesterday. I used to work with people like you before I had visions of heaven. It's really touching to hear your story. There was a book written about what you went through, and it was written over 50 years ago by C.S. Lewis. It's called That Hideous Strength. I was wondering if you'd studied that or ever heard of it or read it.
I have never read any of C.S. Lewis's books. I had my reading kind of set by my parents as to what I could read.
Yeah. What's so encouraging I felt about the book is when I take people to heaven and they get interested and it starts really taking off, I pretty much make that required reading for them because it teaches both sides of the issue. It teaches the evil. It talks about the vivisections. It talks about the mind control. It talks about all that stuff, but it talks about the positive very strongly and how that all will be overcome in the long run. It's a very beautiful, encouraging book to read. And that's why I wanted to bring it to your attention. It might be very good for you to read as well. It's just a beautiful book.
Thank you. Yeah, I will have to look into that. One thing I will say is that a lot of people, when I speak, they think that I might come across as sad. Well, I'm sad because this whole thing is tragic. It's very tragic. And that I might come across as, gee, there's nothing I can do. Well, in a way, there is nothing that I can do other than what I am doing. I feel I'm doing the most powerful thing that I can do. And it takes a lot of courage for me to do it.
My name is Joseph Spencer. From May 1970 to October 1997, I served the United States government as a top secret operative, but not in a category that is commonly known or understood. I was known as a man in black. Following 7 years acting as a counterintelligence agent for the CIA, I was recruited for a new assignment that entailed working within above top secret operations. I was aware of the black budget projects, but never knew the context of them due to their high level of secrecy. Even the president was denied access to their inner workings. Annually, billions of dollars are poured into black projects, which operate without any supervision or intrusion. They have full autonomy. The operations deal primarily with advancing military technologies, most of which have been reverse engineered from recovered alien spacecrafts that had either crashed or were shot down by our military. The public, sadly, will never, ever have knowledge of these operations. This transition in my life happened in 1970. The senior black project director was William T. Latham, who had worked under CIA Executive Director Richard Schlesinger. Latham stated that I was the perfect candidate for my new position. I was a foster child, and I had no connections to existing relatives. I had no friends or social life. It was easy for them to erase my past and provide me with a new identity. I gave myself to them as a priest would to his God. But first, my mind had to be erased. I was injected with various forms of mind-altering drugs, LSD, heroin, mescaline, morphine, sodium pentothal, and more. Drug-induced hypnosis followed with antegrade and retrograde amnesia. The goal was to program me to do two things: kill and forget. After 9 months of programming, I had become a man in black. What I later discovered was that not all the men in black were human. About a third were alien hybrids. Their distinctive feature was the absence of whites in their eyes, giving the impression of empty eye sockets. This unsettled me, and it took months to adjust to the reality of alien integration. My assignments largely dealt with UFO sightings and crash sites. In August of 1971, I witnessed my first UFO crash site just north of Edwards Air Force Base in California. Inside the craft were 3 grayed humanoids, 2 dead, 1 still alive. Also in the craft was a human female abductee. The alien humanoids were transported to the base, but 2 witnesses had arrived before us and took several photographs. The first surrendered his camera, but the second fled. When we apprehended him, he resisted, and I was ordered to silence him, which I did. The killing of witnesses was executed with a wand that acted very much like today's taser, but the voltage from the wand would cause immediate cardiac arrest, and the victim's death would be attributed to natural causes. We silenced countless victims, not only men, but women of all ages and even teenagers. The following day, after each kill, our memories were reset, so we would have no recollection of the murders. A good majority of the victims were ufologists and whistleblowers. Among the ufologists I personally silenced were Paul William Cooper, Milton Vigay, Claude Monroe, Anthony Vargas, and noted documentarian Samantha Willis. When my wand malfunctioned with Samantha, I resorted to strangulation. She fought for her life for almost 2 minutes. In recalling this act, I stared into her pleading eyes for the entire duration with absolutely no remorse, guilt, or feelings. That was how effective the mind conditioning was. And it's her face that haunts my dreams more than anyone's to this day.
So they stuffed out a documentarian.
Yep.
Well, that's not good to hear.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on. In 1954, Dwight Eisenhower signed what's known as the Granada Treaty with the alien gray race. In exchange for shared alien technologies, the Greys were allowed to abduct a number of humans annually for medical examination. The Greys also demanded anonymity from the public. A short time later, human technology took a giant leap forward with circuit chips, fiber optics, and lasers. The Granada Treaty is still active today, but the number of human abductions has increased, despite objections from the world governments. Now, the really interesting part. Every year, at least 8 million children go missing in the world. I can attest that 1/3 of them are abducted by government operatives and transported to any one of the 1,477 underground military installations on the planet, then imprisoned for the remainder of their lives. The children are subjected to biological and genetic experiments, dissections, and mutilations performed not by human scientists, but an alien gray species. During my stay at the Vanguard Underground Base north of Phoenix, Arizona, I witnessed many of these procedures. Because there was no form of anesthesia administered to the young patients, the halls reverberated with the screams of tortured children from morning to night. The ones that perished were incinerated in the installation's crematoriums. My point of contact at this base was Lieutenant Colonel Charles T. Leninger, and he was a human-alien hybrid. And get ready for this. In 1994, the World Population Summit in Cairo, Egypt, had 160 nations participate, where they all agreed that the human population was out of control and must be stopped because the world is running out of resources. An agreement was formed that would mandate the reduction of humans from 6 billion to 800 million by the year 2030. This meant finding a method or methods to wipe out nearly 95% of the population. Solutions were discovered, investigated, tested, then created, and have been in full force since. The procedures have been inflicted onto the human race are as follows. 1. Toxic levels of chemically enhanced fluoride have been secretly added to our drinking water over the last 20 years in every city and community on the planet. I personally oversaw the delivery of fluoride barrels to Denver, Chicago, Tampa, and Minneapolis water departments. The adverse effects of fluoride poisoning to the human body are numerous and debilitating. The effects to children is damage to their neurological development, among other serious ailments. 2. Man-made viruses and diseases. The AIDS virus, which was a designer byproduct of the American Disease Institute, was distributed through vaccines to the public in 1980. Instituted as a preliminary population control tactic, the results were successful and led to more lab-produced viruses that have since been unleashed onto the public. Among those is the development of a mutated version of the common flu to replicate the 1918 influenza pandemic that killed 40 million people. The first strain of this new flu virus will be released to the public in late 2017. So if we see a flu outbreak in the late 2017 or early 2018 that's killing people, we'll know this is true.
Right.
3. Killing us from the air with neurotoxins, barium chloride, cancer microbes, and viruses by way of chemtrails, released into the skies daily over all inhabited regions by military aircrafts. The effects of these toxins are severe and over time lethal, causing respiratory ailments, cancer, damage to the immune systems, and sterilization in men. Since the chemtrail plan was implemented, sperm count in men has dropped nearly 50%. If this isn't reversed soon, the human race will face early extinction. Now the grand finale. This is some scary shit. In March 1997, an event known as the Phoenix Lights became the most infamous UFO sighting in history. A mile-wide vessel, clearly not man-made, flew slowly and silently over the state of Arizona and was witnessed by 10,000 people, including the governor of Arizona. To date, there has been no reasonable explanation. But for every witness interviewed, the craft was as real as anything they'd ever seen. Their lives were transformed. They now believe that we truly are not alone. However, there is another truth, for I know what they really saw. In 1986, while stationed at an underground installation near Boulder, Colorado, I was introduced to Project Skybeam by Lieutenant General Andrew Garris. I was then led down a corridor and into a large hangar where a stealth bomber hovered only 20 feet above me. I stood there confused. Then Garris looked over at me and smiled, then asked if I was certain of what I was seeing. I replied, of course. What else could it be? I was then shocked to find out that this wasn't a real craft. It was a projected hologram. Since the early 1950s, scientists have been developing holographic technology, and over the years improved it to a state that we can only imagine. As I stood there staring at the bomber, which looked so absolutely real and solid that I could reach up and touch it, I contemplated the possibilities. What if this projection was 1,000 feet up in the sky? How would anyone know that that was an illusion? The Phoenix Lights craft, witnessed by 10,000 people, was the first grand-scale skybeam test upon the public. It succeeded beyond expectations. In October 1938, Orson Welles unleashed his War of the Worlds radio broadcast to the American public. It was so realistically portrayed, vast portions of the population went into panic. Terrified citizens scrambled to evacuate their cities in droves. America had been easily tricked by very simple means. To amplify this response, those who are truly in power of not only our country, but all the countries on the planet, and who are the true purveyors of the depopulation process, have formulated the final stage of their sinister plan. In the year 2024, a global event will alter the course of mankind's future. The world will stand witness to a massive alien invasion. Thousands of projected holographic alien warships will blanket the skies, sending people into a global panic. Real military crafts within the holograms will inflict actual damage to the surrounding areas to sell the gimmick. And as a result of the ensuing human chaos, a one-world government will immediately form without any resistance from the people. They will be the new world order. Once this happens, we as a people will be doomed to enslavement and accelerated depopulation. With that said, the only hope for human salvation is to acquire and spread the knowledge of these activities and agendas. Resist, retaliate, then conquer this imposing enemy. The time is now, as humanity is rapidly approaching its final days. The knowledge of what's coming is taking its toll on me. I see all of these people living their lives, enjoying themselves, planning their futures. I'm oblivious to the fact that it's all going to end soon. Here I am at a park where children are playing, and in the skies above, I can see the chemtrails poisoning the air and slowly killing us all in plain sight. I've never felt so helpless. I want to scream out to the world, but I'd only be laughed at, ridiculed. When Claire said the memoirs were a fabrication, I secretly wished she was right. Then I could sleep at night. But I know, beyond a reasonable doubt, that it's all true. That Joe was being completely forthright. I saw it in his eyes. I heard the tremor in his voice when he spoke about it. It didn't come off as an admission. It was more of a deeply concerned confession. He was scared for us all. And that says a lot, coming from a man who was a government assassin.